All right, we're
Good
back at it.
morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing just fine, just fine.
Very excited to dive into week 4
Mm,
podcast review of What Do You See? I thought that beginning story was hilarious.
isn't it?
It was so funny what your son said,
Yeah.
and
At the
that was his
time,
perspective.
yeah, at the time it was like, what? No, he didn't say that, but yeah, he did.
All right. So we're gonna jump into it. We have lots of amazing questions today that can help to deepen some understanding about what was spoken about in this podcast. In the beginning, you spoke about homeschooling. We know that you're a home educator or once was for many years. And
Hmm.
with the title being What Do You See? What did you see during that time that caused you to take on home education at a time that it was so unpopular?
Ooh. Well, I didn't necessarily see anything.
Okay.
So I'd never heard of home education.
Wow.
I didn't even know it was a thing, and I certainly didn't know that it was a legal thing.
Mm.
My husband, once we married, his brother and his sister-in-law had 3 children and they home educated their children. And after we married, we went to visit them. And I was so moved by the way that the children could converse with us and just carry on conversations like little adults. They were very articulate. We went on a couple of field trips. They were very involved. I mean, it was something about them that amused me,
Mm.
but also intrigued me. And he had mentioned that he wanted, he would like to have our children home educated. And, it sort of went in one ear and out the other because I didn't really know. I didn't even ask. So what is that? I was just like, oh, okay. I felt like it would be something in passing or either it would come back if it were meant to be. I
Right.
didn't really dig into it until I saw the children. Once I saw the children, then I began to ask my sister-in-law questions. It's like, okay, so you homeschool your children, and they were probably maybe 9, 8,
Okay.
7, or 10, maybe somewhere in there. So, you would expect them to be able to talk and get someone involved, but not most 7, 8 year olds are really able to carry on adult conversations about your field trip and what's taking place. And we went to science places, that were with science and math. And anyway, when we got back from vacation, the Lord began to impress upon me that it was something that I needed to do. And it was like a seed that was planted with that family.
Right.
But then after one day I was in church and had the children with me, and I don't remember what the message was, but whatever it was, I think it had to do with family.
Mhm.
And the Lord began to really tell me that that was what He wanted me to do. So it was more of yeah, here we planted these seeds, but and you're looking and you're intrigued by it, but this is your new assignment. And I didn't even know, I mean, I knew nothing about it. I went to public school all my life, with the exception of my mother took me out of public school 1 year, maybe two, I don't even remember, so it couldn't have been that long, and put me in a Christian school that was in a building that had tables and they had cubicles. And so you sat in this cubicle, you put uh, earphones over your head,
Mhm.
and then you had all your work on it was like a computer. But I don't know that it was some sort of mechanism where you could see everything right there in the screen.
Mhm.
Um, and that was my only experience with not going to an actual public school. And it was in a small town and there were very few students, and then she took me out. So that was my only experience, and I knew nothing about home education, so I actually had to do a lot of research. So it really wasn't me seeing anything. It was God saying, this is your new assignment. You need to do this.
Wow.
That's what I said in the very beginning. I was like, wow, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with your little ones, it wasn't just one child.
Right. At the time I had one that was going into high school. And then my husband and I had 5. And I think at that time we didn't have the five, I think we had three little ones.
Okay.
But they were all close together. My children, the last five were born, all of them were born 2 years apart. One might be hitting 3 years, but they're all very close. We just went boom, boom, boom. Once we got married,
Okay.
started having babies, and then we're like, we're done. So I had to do, fortunately for me at that time, they were all preschool.
Okay.
So
Mhm. That's a good
when we
sign.
started, they were pretty much preschool, but even in preschool, my 4-year-old learned to read. So we taught her how to read. And her first big test of her reading, learning, because I taught phonics,
Okay.
she could read anything in the King James Version of the Bible. Any word that you gave her, she could read it. So her entertainment with the family was a lot of times was whenever we would go somewhere, people would want her to read. Can you read this? Can you read this? Because she could, and then I thought everybody would do that. And of course, everybody didn't. It's another,
That was your norm in your household.
yes, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
when you received this assignment, I mean, I would imagine it seemed like a huge undertaking. And you speak about how we perceive, you know, large projects or, huge endeavors, so to speak. You mentioned don't make a mountain out of a molehill. A lot of people will tend to see things, huge undertakings like this as overwhelming. And they don't often, some often don't think of it as just taking small chunks. You even mentioned this in your podcast, a small chunk at a time, not looking at the entire big picture because that can become overwhelming. Why do you think so many people are wired to think like that instead of just thinking of the small steps that is necessary to achieve a large undertaking?
So first, I don't think that we're wired that way. I really believe that a lot of our cultural norms or where, our sphere of influence, where we've been raised, who we've been around, has a lot to do with the way that we think.
Right.
So I don't think we're necessarily wired to
Wired the opposite.
function that way. I think when God created us, he created us with the ability. I mean, remember when he created us, he told Adam, I want you to name all the animals. Talk about a big undertaking. Every animal he created, his whole assignment was here's this world zoo, and I want you to take control over it. By the way, handle this garden that you're in. And, I mean, that's a big assignment. So I think we're wired to handle big things. I think that because we're in various situations in our lives where it affects the way that we think and see things, and we have to sort of train ourselves to think differently. And with my undertaking, the assignment that God gave me was more of okay, here's this big picture. You've got to homeschool your children. And he also told me with my daughter that was in high school, she actually went to the first year, a Christian school. And he told me, he said, so what you're going to do for the younger ones, you need to do for all. So I ended up pulling her out of high school and home educating her as well. So it wasn't even a thing where, here's these little ones that, yeah, you can do these, but I'm going to give you a freshman, by the way, and I want you to home educate her as well. So that's a completely different picture as opposed to him just saying, do the babies, because you think of babies at preschool. I mean, you could get a third grader that could teach a preschooler because they've already learned pretty much what the preschooler learns. So, but when you talk about a high school student, so I think with me, I started doing research, and I let that be the beginning for me. It's like you can't think of the end or what it's going to be like in the middle. Just do your research. The first thing you need to do is find out what's the law.
Right.
My biggest thing is, listen, am I going to go to jail? My kids going to be taken away because I'm not giving them what people consider proper education because they're not with the masses. So I had to start doing research to find out what the law was for my state. And then after that, then you figure out, okay, so am I able to teach all of them? Because they were different ages. so I thought, okay, well, they're preschool, so pretty much you can do the same
Right.
unless you have an advanced child that needs to get some first grade education because they're a little bit ahead.
Mhm.
So for the first year, it was pretty much learning the law, and figuring out how to respond to people, honestly.
Mm, interesting.
Because you get a lot of, back then, you got a lot of pushback because it was not the norm for, people to homeschool. Fortunately for me, I didn't take my children out of school, the younger ones, because they'd never been in school.
Right.
But for my daughter that was in high school, there was a certain protocol you had to do to actually remove them from school to state that you were going to actually home educate your child.
I see.
And then you had to learn what the law was as far as curriculum, and did the state require the same thing out of me that they required out of people that were in public school or private school. So you had to know the difference between how to maneuver in between um, the law for you. Is it the same as the law for the other schools?
Right.
So I had to do a lot of research. So I think for me, I just decided. Oh, I don't even know if I decided it or if it was just something that happened or if I
Mhm.
even gave thought to it. Because I was more of a type A personality, and I still am. I still lean in that direction, and I'm
Right.
very disciplined and try to be very organized. But I think at that time, I was just, it was just a natural thing to know this is what I need to do first. I mean, you really can't start homeschooling unless you actually know whether it's something you can do and do it without getting in trouble.
Right.
I mean, back then they had truant officers. They had truant officers that actually come to your door, to why aren't your child in school? Sort of like social workers,
Right.
why isn't your child in school? I wouldn't have had to worry about that with my younger ones because they'd never been enrolled in school.
Right. Right.
Fortunately for me, my daughter that was in high school was enrolled in the school that was attached to the church that we went to. So, I mean,
Mhm.
they all knew us and knew what the new road for us was. So,
Okay. So that helped. Hmm.
yes,
So you didn't, it wasn't a matter of putting a whole bunch of thought. I think you just went with how you were being led, it sounds like, it was an
yes,
assignment. So I think when God gives an assignment, I think he makes the way for it to
yeah.
happen.
I think I put thought into the fact that okay, the first thing you need to do is find out the law.
Yeah,
So I know that that was a thought process of mine. I just don't know that it was I don't know that I was necessarily looking at the big picture because to me there was no big picture because I didn't know how to picture it.
I see. Wow.
I had no I had no reference
Wow.
for home education back then. It was back in the early 1990, 1991. So I
Mhm.
didn't really have a reference. Like I couldn't go and I mean, I only knew, I think 3 people, 4 people maybe that were home educating. And one was an older woman that had already home educated her children. So she kind of came alongside of me in some ways, but most of it I learned on my own. So I didn't have a reference. So it wasn't like, oh, what is the big picture? What's it supposed to look like? The only reference that I had was public school or private school. And I had to and I did in the beginning try to align myself with the way that public schools ran and private schools ran in the
Right.
very beginning. And then
Mhm.
it didn't work for me. And the Lord had to show me that you are the principal, if you will, of your school. You run it how you want
Right.
and
Right.
take the laws and then take those laws, stay with those laws, but you have the liberty to run your school the way you want to run your school, just like everybody else has that liberty.
Exactly.
But you don't know that
Right.
because you have nothing to pattern yourself after other than what someone else has done or is doing.
I see.
So I had to come away from that as well.
I think that's brave,
It
especially since you
is.
don't have a frame of reference at all. It's
It
brave.
is, but to be fair, I didn't want that for my children. It wasn't like because I know a lot of people have talked to me about this and it's like, oh, you really wanted to. No,
You did
I
not.
didn't know. I mean, it's so if you don't know anything about home education, you don't know that it's a real thing. Who can dream it up? I didn't even know it existed. So it wasn't something that was like, oh, I really want this for my children. It seems like it's a good thing. So I'm like seeing a school and saying, oh, I want my child in that school. You know,
Mhm.
academically, that's great. You know, they've got excellent teachers. I didn't know anything about this. So
Mhm.
to be fair, it wasn't something that I just said, oh, I really want this. What I did want was to have a solid foundation,
Mhm.
a solid biblical foundation for our children.
Mhm.
I wanted a home that was very inviting for them, where they always wanted to be home with us. I was very involved with my children. And I did incorporate that into our school eventually, but starting out, to be fair, it wasn't something I wanted. It was something that God told me I had to do.
I see.
And once he said I had to do it, then it wasn't like, I don't want to do that. It was just like, okay, so
Mhm.
you're giving me this assignment and I don't really know what I'm doing and I have to now learn that. So it became okay. But to be fair, it wasn't something
So
that I was like, yeah, I want to do
you're being
this.
obedient.
I was being obedient. And I did have a reference as far as my sister-in-law, and I liked what I saw at that time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. But even when my husband mentioned it earlier on, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I didn't. I had never heard of it before. Yeah,
That was the first seed planted. See how
it
that works?
was.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And I have to say, I am a definite homeschool advocate. I
After
am.
through it, right?
Yes. After going through it, I would tell anyone if they have the desire to home educate, if it's in their heart, if they're intrigued by it and they want to try it, I would tell them, do it, go for it. You have nothing, you have really, I don't feel like you have anything to lose. There's so many options with it. And I just feel like that at this point in my life, what I've learned
Mhm.
and the benefits that my children have had, and they've actually voiced that to me as adults, I just think do it.
Yeah.
Go for it. A
So
lot of people feel like they aren't qualified. I certainly was definitely not a person that was qualified to home educate.
you
No.
think? Hmm,
Oh, I know I wasn't. No, I wasn't qualified. I didn't have a teaching degree,
I know. Okay.
but it wasn't required in my state. So in other states, it is a requirement. But even at that, you can partner with people that have a degree. I mean, and I know this probably isn't part of the question, but I
Mhm.
will say that to get around some things, we had to because we actually eventually ended up running a school. Other people came to us and wanted us to teach their children. And
Wow.
so I actually had to write up a contract that said that the parents were involved in the school because where the state where we were, that was one of the requirements was that the parent had to be had to teach. So,
Okay.
but it didn't say how long, it didn't say what anything else. So we had to write up our contract where the parent was involved, but they just weren't involved every day. All those parents went to work, but they had to
Right.
put in so many hours of involvement throughout the school year. So there are
Okay.
so many ways that you can partner with other people and do school. So when you talk about the what do you see, you know, for me, I didn't get the big picture like I have it now.
I
You
see.
know, I did have a little bit of,
A
you know,
little bit.
just a little bit. I think God opened my eyes as I went along. Yeah.
Wow. Not
Yeah.
many people would do that. Oh my goodness. Not many people would do that. Not having that frame of reference. Well, my
Yeah. I'm pretty much a
honor.
forward. Yeah. In
That's all
all
I keep hearing as I listen to that
everything.
story. Like,
Yeah.
wow. Wow.
Right.